couple weeks ago, I was scrolling through YouTube when this Andrei Zik video popped up in my suggested feed. And while I'm yet to be convinced to invest in any dog-related cryptocurrency, I did actually learn a couple of things when watching this video. For one, Andre and the Doge millionaire definitely have an interesting relationship. The amount of times Andre had to backtrack and clarify things that the Doge millionaire was saying, it was honestly comical. But the other, much more insightful thing I learned from this video had to do with the responsibility that YouTubers have to their audience when it comes to disclosing their own investments. Now, obviously, the reach that Andre has, that Graham Stephan has, that Australia's own Brandon has on his New Money channel is much wider reaching than what Alan and I have here on our channel. But that doesn't mean that we have any less of a responsibility to take care of you guys. After all, you guys are taking the valuable time from your day and choosing to use some of it to watch our content. And given the nature of this content, it's definitely not trivial. We talk about specific apps and strategies that we are personally using. And while we always try our best to go through the specific reasons as to why we are using them and create a neutral case for how someone may want to use this or may not, there are still concerns with biases, as there are with anyone talking about pretty much anything. And while the thorough reasoning and explanations we give in the videos where we talk about these products are a good first step to mitigating some of these risks, as Andre mentioned in his video, although I'm paraphrasing here, actions speak louder than words. It's one thing to take on board what someone says in a video about a product or service or investment strategy, but it's a whole nother thing to take into account how they actually vote themselves. And as it's often said, people vote with their money. So when it comes to Alan and I here on YouTube, or any personal finance influencer for that matter, really understanding what it is that they put their money into is probably more telling than any video they could create on a certain topic. And so, funnily enough, from a seemingly unsuspecting video about two meme coins going against each other, I think it's finally time to pull back the curtains on my personal investments. And so today we're going to go through just that. Now, just a quick disclaimer, while I have completed an applied finance degree, I am definitely not a fully licensed financial planner, and so none of this should be taken as financial advice. But even then, as we go through my investments and my plan for the future, keep in mind I'm not an investing expert. In many ways, I'm just like you, starting out my investing journey, and if I'm being honest, I'm kind of terrified. Opening up about this intimate of a topic on the internet is kind of scary, and making the decision to do this is definitely not something I've taken lightly. But given just how valuable I find this sort of content when it's produced by other creators, namely the person who got this YouTube finance space started for me personally, Graham Stephan, it was honestly a game changer, and I felt like I could really trust Graham in how transparent and open he was with this sort of thing, which at the time was very unique. Not many people were openly displaying exactly how much they have in certain investments and what they're doing with all of their money moving forward. However, it seems to have worked for him, and so I'm willing to take the leap. And I suppose if you guys appreciate this, all I ask is a gentle tapping of the like button, and once that's done, we'll jump into it. Okay, so let's provide a little bit of context. Basically, growing up, my life when it comes to money and personal finance was, I would say, pretty normal. I got my first casual job at around the age of 15, and by the time I graduated, I'd probably saved up around about $2,000. So I definitely wasn't one of those 18-year-old investing prodigies. However, although at this stage I'd done a pretty poor job of saving my money, I was actually exposed to the idea of investing, which I later found out is something that's not super common. My exposure to this actually came through my dad. Now, with that being said, money and investing wasn't really a common topic for conversation in our house. In fact, deep conversations in general were actually far and few between when it came to my dad. Now, that's not to say we had a tough relationship at all. Honestly, my dad would be one of my biggest role models, but he and his side of the family were just naturally closed off, and especially compared to my mum's side of the family, which often would say too much, it just meant that when I was young, there weren't many opportunities to really dive in deep and learn from the experience that my dad had. But as far as I'm concerned, having him there and his work to plant the seed of investing in my mind is something that I find invaluable today, and I am honestly incredibly grateful for that being part of my life. But it wasn't until I moved interstate at age 17 before things really started for me financially. And honestly, as strange as it sounds, moving from the Gold Coast to Sydney, one of the most expensive cities in the entire world, was probably the most important factor to me taking control of my money and wanting to get on top of investing and building wealth. Now, I know that probably sounds insane to a lot of you, given just how much you can save if you are lucky enough to be able to stay at home and not pay rent at your parents' place. But for me personally, I had a different experience. Now, when it comes to the development of my money psychology, there is more to unpack there. There were life-changing books, there were conversations that changed how I saw money, and obviously my time at university studying applied finance. But being conscious of time, we won't go into detail in this video, but if that is something that you would like me to elaborate on, definitely let me know in the comments section below. I'm honestly happy to talk about it, but I don't want to put out content that you guys wouldn't be interested in. But now, the time you've all been waiting for, where do I physically hold my money? What investments do I have open at the moment? And what are my plans for investing moving forward? So, for context, every one of these investments has been split roughly 50-50 with myself and my now wife, Magella. In the hopes of trying to put a little timeline together, let's go through each investment in chronological order. Now, I know it's not very exciting, but technically this would be the first money that Magella and I invested, and that would be within our superannuation. As of recording, our combined super balance at this stage is $44,567. Now, moving on to the more exciting stuff, our investments made outside of super. This is an investment I've talked about multiple times on the channel before today, and it's something that we're likely going to keep up for a very long time, as it's formed part of the base or the foundation of our investment portfolio. So for those of you who have been watching our videos for quite some time, you'll probably know what I'm about to say, but for everyone else, this is when we started dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500 ETF, VOO. We began this strategy in November of 2019, where we would use stake to invest $300 every single month into this ETF. Now at this stage, Magella and I were still just dating, so we actually have two separate stake accounts with a combined total today that's worth 13,371 Australian dollars. Then, only 1 month later, in December of 2019, Magella and I made our first investment into real estate, but it mightn't be in the way you may think. Basically, at the time, Magella and I had been saving up and we were sitting on quite a bit of cash. However, at that stage, we were still working for the university on technically a casual contract. So attempting to actually get a mortgage for an investment property was likely going to prove impossible. So luckily for us, an older family member of ours who did have an existing investment property was actually looking for a bit of cash. And so to put things simply, we created a joint venture agreement with that family member, which basically said in exchange for our $35,000, we would be able to take a portion of the sale proceeds from that investment property. And fortunately for us, that position is now worth $56,000. Now, we definitely understand for this specific case, we were in a very fortunate position, and we obviously wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of that family member. But considering that $35,000 investment was honestly the biggest either of us had ever made in our life, it definitely needed to be included in this video. Our next investment was again in real estate, and again used a sort of unorthodox method of investing. This investment took place in August of 2020 and cost $27,000. Now, believe it or not, this one is probably even more complicated than the first, but to try and put it simply, Magella and I had located a promising development proposal in an area that we thought would see really good growth in the next couple of years. And as our chances to qualify for a mortgage hadn't really changed that much since 2019, we basically signed an options contract for one of the lots as part of this subdivision. For those of you who don't know, an options contract is basically a contract which says, if I pay you a premium today, then I will have the right to buy a certain asset at a specified price sometime in the future. So to make that a little clearer, I'll bring it into our example. Magella and I fork up the deposit for one of the lots as part of this subdivision. Then at some point in the future, we are going to be able to buy that lot officially from you for a predetermined price. In this case, the price is $160,000. And in terms of exactly when in the future we're going to be able to trigger this contract, well, basically there are two options. Either once the property appreciates in value by $50,000 or 5 years into the future, whichever is sooner. And to just quickly explain why this was something that Magella and I invested in, well, given that in August of 2020, we probably weren't going to qualify for a mortgage, this was a way to get into the property market without having to fork up the full cost of the property and take on a mortgage. This way, we could offer up our deposit, put a hold on a piece of property, lock in a certified price, and then in 5 years' time, or when it hits $50,000 worth of appreciation, then take advantage of that. And at that point, if we still can't qualify for a mortgage, we can pass on the deal to someone else and take our $50,000 worth of equity. Or if at that point in time we can qualify for a mortgage and we do still believe that this lot has good potential as an investment property, then we go ahead with the construction process and get tenants in as soon as possible. Now, in terms of what this investment is worth today, while we can't get an exact figure until someone physically comes in and values the property, given the sale price of similar properties in the surrounding area, that $27,000 investment is probably worth around about $60,000 today. So that brings us to January of this year. On the 11th, I was finally able to call Magella my wife, and a month following that, we officially combined all of our finances. Now, at that point, while we didn't anticipate it, we actually had a slight change in our strategy. Now, I have spoken about our budgeting strategy here in this video, but to try and give you an overview, our budgeting strategy kind of mixed two together. So we have a portion of our expenses, which are fixed dollar expenses. Things like rent, groceries, transportation. Those are expenses which shouldn't change from month to month. However, there are other things like discretional spending, charity giving, and investing, which in our opinion are better suited to a percentage of your income. So when your income increases, you are increasing those portions of your budget. And so bringing it back to early 2021, basically what Magella and I decided was for all of our investing or saving related percentages, we wanted that to purely go towards us building up our emergency fund. So as much as it pained us to do it, we actually stopped investing into VOO purely because we wanted to put everything we could towards achieving this one goal of getting our emergency fund up to 6 months worth of expenses. Now, fast forward to today, literally a couple of days ago, we're super excited to finally be able to say that we have saved up 6 months worth of expenses. And so from the next paycheck forward, we're reigniting our investing and saving towards different investments. So just to give you a quick overview of what that's going to look like, the first part of our investing strategy that I'm going to talk about is actually the only one that adopts a fixed amount strategy. We are luckily reigniting our VOO investing. At this stage, we're planning on doing $300 a month between us. And just so you know, we're planning on using eToro to make these trades. The next thing is we're now putting 15% of our pre-tax income into superannuation. And finally, going back to the percentages I mentioned before with regards to our budget, we're going to have 25% of that go towards real estate investing. So at this stage, that'll probably look like just piling up money until the opportunity presents itself. And lastly, we're going to have about 6% go towards other investment opportunities, whether this be crypto or an individual stock that may present itself as an opportunity. This smaller percentage of money is supposed to be there to incorporate the more risky investment, those which may come up and that we don't want to miss out on, but are also limited by the amount of money we can put in, because our opinion is that we should go into any of these assuming that the value is going to drop to zero. And with that, I'll leave the video here. If you guys have any questions, just pop them down below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you have any suggestions for our strategy, we would really appreciate it. Like I said, we're just starting out. But other than that, check out one of our other videos and I'll see you next time.